The Dragon typing offers some of the most coolest and strongest Pokemon in the entire series, ranging from pseudo-legendaries to legendaries to anything else you could imagine. Can I make up a strong enough team of lizards to take down all 200 waves of Pokerogue and defeat Eternatus? There's only one way to find out. First things first is our starter choices, and I decided to go with Gible because in this game its base shiny form is actually custom and it keeps its blue and yellow color palette throughout all 3 stages of evolution, getting rid of that very boring, slightly more blue version that it normally is. Next I ended up going with Dratini since I also had it shiny, and who doesn't love Barney? I mean, I guess it's reverse Barney because Barney's purple, but you guys get the point. And last but not least, I ended up going with Noivern as, to be honest, that's all I could really afford at this point, and I'm a very big fan of Noivern, and I have a custom shiny variant for him in this game. So this is my team of lizards that we're starting out with, and we're going to see just how far I can make it using only dragon types in Pokerogue. The first challenge of our run didn't come until wave 25 against our rival Ivy. She started with a Florigato, but I had a Gible with Dragon Dance and Bitter Blade, and these 2 moves combined were more than enough to take down this grass cat. After Florigato went down, Ivy sent out Staravia. Staravia was also not a problem as I just go for another Dragon Dance, pretty much ensuring that I one-shot the rest of Ivy's team. After getting hit with Quick Attack, I go for a Bitter Blade, taking down Staravia to just 1 HP, before I decide to go for another Dragon Dance just because she made me mad. After Staravia literally takes 1 damage and goes down, she sends in Mankey, which just gets taken out in just 1 Bitter Blade thanks to the +3 bonus we have from Dragon Dance. After that, it was just a few waves later and it was time to take on our first gym leader, Erica. As you guys know if you've watched any of my videos before, Erica is always nothing but a mere pushover as I just set up a few Dragon Dances on the Tangela that can basically do nothing to me, except for poison me of course, but the poison won't really matter as I have Bitter Blade which just heals me after every turn. After taking down the Tangela, our Gible evolved into Gabite, and this color palette looks so clean, and I'm so glad that they fixed Gible shiny in this game. Gabite then faces off against Bellsprout, and I don't know if this was ever going to be a challenge, to be honest, even if I didn't have a team of dragons. Gabite then has to face off against Gloom, which just means the exact same fate as Bellsprout, and at that point it was all over for gym leader Erica. After taking down Paris on wave 31, we got the most important item we possibly could have gotten in this entire run, the map. The reason why the map is so important is that there's only 2 biomes that you can go to in this game that give you the chance to go to the Wasteland biome. The Wasteland biome is the only biome in the entire game that offers primarily dragon types. I'll cover more of that later, but we just found an Eviolite, which was amazing for our dragon types, before evolving our pink Dratini into a beautiful Dragonair. I honestly have not seen shiny Dragonair too much, so this was very refreshing to me. Now it was time to fight our rival Ivy on wave 55, and she now has a fully evolved team. Meowscarada does land a U-turn on Gabite, but I just go for a Dragon Dance, allowing me to Bitter Blade Staraptor to almost half HP. After a Brave Bird from the Staraptor, that put it in death range from another Bitter Blade, securing our kill on a Staraptor. I then stopped Gabite from learning Dragon Claw as I didn't see its value to be honest, and I go for another Bitter Blade on Meowscarada. This takes Meowscarada down to about 8 HP as I just go for 1 more, knocking out the cat. After this, Ivy sent in her Primate, which I just kept clicking Bitter Blade as I just wanted to get as much health as possible, and the Eviolite is really doing work right now as Gabite's taking almost no damage from any of Ivy's team. Vikavolt comes in and somehow lives on about 2 HP to a Bitter Blade, but it doesn't matter because she was not able to take me down. Our Gabite then evolves into the nefarious Garchomp, which this shiny sprite looks amazing. I don't know why Nintendo didn't keep it this way originally. On wave 60, it was time to face off against Gym Leader Grant for the very first time. And I say the very first time because we will be seeing a lot more of him throughout this entire run. After getting just a few Dragon Dances off with Garchomp, I was able to take down Crustle pretty easily, landing just a single Bitter Blade, taking down the Prehistoric Crab to just 1 HP. After getting hit with another X-Scissor, I do get taken down to 77, but at this point Garchomp is +3 attack and speed, meaning that there really shouldn't be anything capable of living. Auroras comes in and I hit it with another Bitter Blade as I could have gone for the quad effective Meteor Mash, but I really wanted that extra HP. Tyrantrum comes in and dodges a Meteor Mash, but it's okay as we hit on the next turn, taking down the Prehistoric Dinosaur. Barbaracle comes in and I go for a Bitter Blade for whatever reason before clicking Meteor Mash and taking down the Crustacean. And that was the end of Grant for the first time. In celebration, Noibat decided it was time to evolve as it evolves into Noivern. And I really like the shiny sprite because it makes it feel like it's a literal bat with the brown color scheme. Now Dragonair was evolving, and honestly this made me realize how bad Dragonite Shiny really is, because it goes from this elegant pink lizard thing into just a barf dragon, but I love him anyways. Wave 69 is the first wave that we ran into an opposing dragon type, meaning that this was the first member I could possibly add to the team. I'm not a huge fan of Altaria, but I picked her up anyways. After defeating the bosses on wave 70, we got access to the Wasteland biome. And this meant that we had about 10 waves that we were going to run into presumably dragon-type Pokemon to add to our team. On wave 71, we ran into 2 of them, being Sliggoo and Cyclizar, and I'm not a big fan of Cyclizar, so I decided that it'd be best if I just caught the Sliggoo to get a Goodra. On the next wave, I ran into another Cyclizar paired with a Vibrava, which of course I was going to catch in order to get Flygon. Unfortunately, Flygon doesn't have a Mega yet, but you know what, I'll take this dragon over nothing, as it's still pretty cool. On wave 75, I encountered another Vibrava and a Haxorus. Haxorus is one of those Pokemon that I've never actually used, but I've always wanted to, so I was going to add this to my team no matter what. It had a good nature, so the decision of who to drop from my team was the next decision, and honestly it wasn't that hard as I'm not really an Altaria fan, so bye-bye birdie. On wave 90, it was time to fight Grant for the second time this run. He started off with Armaldo as I started out with our Barney, and I decided to just go for a Dragon Dance, predicting the switch into Aurorus. The benefit of fighting Grant multiple times is that I basically knew what his team was every single time, and despite this, Dragonite still goes down because it did like no damage to the Aurorus. This is okay though, because Garchomp comes in and hits a Meteor Mash, which is quad effective, taking down the prehistoric dinosaur in just one hit. Armaldo comes back out, and I go for another Meteor Mash, getting it down to about 20% HP. Armaldo does hit Garchomp and gets a pretty good Omni boost, but it doesn't matter as Garchomp still outspeeds and takes it out the next turn. Questel comes in and gets hit with a Meteor Mash that takes it down to about 30% of its HP before getting hit once more, taking it out once and for all. Grant then sends in his Tyrantrum, and this was definitely the scariest Pokemon on his team, as it outsped our Garchomp, knocking it out in just one turn with Dragon Hammer. I was not certain that I could outspeed, let alone kill, this Tyrantrum with the rest of my team, but Haxorus does manage to get in and take it down to about 15% of its HP, as Flygon comes in to try to finish the job. However, I was out of PP on Earthquake, which means I had to settle for a Bulldoze, which ends up hitting the Barbaracle instead of taking out the Tyrantrum. This was okay though, as I go for a Dragon Rush on Barbaracle, taking it down to its Citrus Berry, before landing another Bulldoze, taking it back down to 10% HP. One more is more than enough to take down the Crustacean, as Tyrantrum comes back in and meets the same exact fate as its predecessor. What's that ID? You said if I win, they have to like and subscribe? Oh, that's crazy. Anyways, Flygon goes for a Dragon Dance against the Masquerada, getting it a little bit more bulked up. I decide to go for a Dragon Rush after this, which takes Masquerada down to just 10% HP, not confirming the kill. This was a little bit scary, but I had a team full of dragons, so it wasn't the worst thing in the world, as Noivern comes in and goes for a Nasty Plot. This worked out perfectly for me as Kingdra comes in, and the Nasty Plot allows me to one-shot it using just one Dragon Pulse. And at this point, Noivern was pretty beefed up as Nasty Plot raises your special attack by 2 stages, and I was pretty confident that I was going to be able to one-shot the rest of Ivy's team with the combination of Aeroblast and Dragon Pulse. After taking down the Staraptor and Vikavolt, it was time for Annihilate, and I hit it with another Aeroblast, taking it down in just one hit. I don't know what the odds were of Noivern's moveset being able to be super effective against Ivy's entire team, just with 2 typing of moves, but you know what, I'm not going to complain. After taking down a couple of Skarmories on wave 100, I got access to the Wasteland once more, meaning that we had another 10 waves of opportunities to pick up new Pokemon for our team. On wave 101, we ran into another Sliggoo, so it wasn't going to be him, but then on wave 107, we ran into a Como. Similar to Haxorus, I've never used this Pokemon before, and I figured, hey, I might as well. But then, I kind of looked at his stats and his moves, and I was like, yeah, maybe it's best I don't. Anyways, it was time for wave 120 against our next gym leader. My team was a little beat up going into this fight, and I just sent a Noivern just to take the hit before going down to its burn. At this point, it was a 4v6, and most of my team had damage taken already, but we still had Garchomp, so there was always a chance. After getting hit with a Muddy Water, I go for a second Dragon Dance, getting me up to +2 with my attack and speed, before going for a Dragon Terra type Dual Chop, At this point, I had to hope that Dual Chop would one-shot the entirety of this gym leader's team, and Excadrill came in, but I knew it would Terrasilize. The only reason why I Terrasilize is because at this point, every single gym leader will have a Terra-type Pokemon on their team, fitting their theme. And at this point, as you guys can see, Garchomp was just taking over, landing every single Dual Chop, taking out every single member of Clay's team in just one hit, one by one. And that was pretty much it for that gym leader. Another cool feature about Pokerogue is that there are custom trainers and fights in this game that do weird stuff to your Pokemon. In this case, I fought a clown that ended up giving my Garchomp the Guts ability, replacing its Sandveil that didn't really do much for me. After cycling through a few dragons, I ended up running into a High Dragon and a Dracovish, which I ended up catching and adding to my team, as I've never used it before and I know just how broken Fish's run could be. On wave 145, it was time to fight Ivy once again, as she still leads with her Masquerada, and I think you guys know the drill at this point. However, Masquerada has access to Play Rough now, which I'm not too sure she had access to before. I end up just going for a Dragon Rush just to get a little bit of chip, taking Masquerada down to just half its HP before Flygon goes down. I send in Dragonite, and at this point, you guys are about to witness greatness, as I decide to go for a Dragon Dance as Masquerada hits me with Return, stealing my Sharp Beak in the process. I go for a Dragon Hammer, which does take out Masquerada in just one turn, as Staraptor comes back in, and I go for another, one-shotting that as well. At this point, I kind of realized that Dragonite's a little busted because a shiny Rayquaza comes in. It also gets one shot by a Dragon Hammer from Dragonite. And at this point, I was so confident, I wasn't even looking at who was getting sent out, just spamming Dragon Hammer, assuming that I was going to win. And that is exactly what happened as her entire team fell. Now it's time to see if Grant, for the third time, can avoid meeting the same fate. He leads with our model, as per usual, as I lead with Garchomp. This time, I set up a bunch of Dragon Dances, as I just saw the power of Dragonite with Dragon Dances, so I'm sure Garchomp could do the same thing. After setting up 3 Dragon Dances, getting me to plus 2.5 in every stat, including attack and speed, I decided it was time to just go for it. Our model does hang on with 9 HP somehow, some way, but it doesn't matter as we're still nearly full health, and as Aurorus comes in, we just Bitter Blade it, getting it back up to complete full health. Shuckle comes in, and I'd be really surprised if I could one-shot this as it's so tanky, and of course I didn't, as it eats a Citrus Berry, getting it back up to half HP. No matter though, because Bitter Blade plus Dragon Dance is just completely broken, and I also have Land's Wrath thanks to my egg moves. Tyranitar comes in and actually Terrasilizes, which I didn't predict happening, but I was just using Land's Wrath, so it worked out perfectly in my favor, one-shotting both the Dragon and the Crustacean and beating Grant for the 3rd time. Just a quick reminder, my team currently is Garchomp, Dragonite, Flygon, Hydreigon, Dracovish, and Noivern. I really like this team, as other than Garchomp and Dragonite, I really haven't used any of these Pokemon before, and I actually found it quite fun this entire run. Anyways, it was time to fight Archie, so that's fun. I go for a Dragon Dance with Garchomp as I just get Freeze Dried because Empoleon has an Ice-type move, which I don't know why I didn't predict. Not like it matters anyways, as my entire team was weak to it, except for Dracovish actually, ironically enough. As Dragonite comes in and lands an Earthquake, getting Empoleon down to half his HP. I go for another Earthquake, and that is enough to take down the King Penguin in just a couple of turns, but Dragonite is critically injured at just 99 HP. I decide to try to go for another Earthquake, but Overqwil actually outspeeds Dragonite and he goes down. Flygon comes out and I go for a Dragon Dance, which worked in my favor as Overqwil switched out into Pelipper, as I was confident this bird could not one-shot Flygon, so I just go for another Dragon Dance. I go for a Dragon Rush, but Flygon is apparently pretty weak. I was not aware of that because even at +2 attack, a Dragon Rush wasn't enough to take down a Pelipper, so maybe I was just left out the loop. I go for a Nasty Paw with Noivern, getting my special attack up to +4 before going for a 3rd one, getting it up to +6. I was confident at this point that Noivern would be able to one-shot the rest of Archie's team, but that wasn't exactly the case, for one very big reason, and I'm sure most of you know that big reason, and if you didn't, you know now, because Archie sends out his Kyogre, and despite being +6 special attack, I only take it down to half HP with a Stab Dragon Pulse. My nerves were shot at this point, as Dracovish and Hydreigon were the last 2 Pokemon I had left to try to take down the rest of Archie's team. I do manage to take Kyogre down to half its final HP bar with a Vicious Rend before it eats its Citrus Berry and boosts its stats with the rest of the berries it was holding. At this point, I thought it was just over as Dracovish falls to another Thunder as Hydreigon comes out. I decided to go for a Snarl trying to lower Kyogre's special attack, but Sharpedo ends up coming out instead, and all of a sudden there was a chance as Kyogre no longer is buffed. I hit an Outrage on Sharpedo. After hitting a second time, it finally went down. All of a sudden, hope was restored as Archie sends out Delmise, which gets hit with Outrage, taking it down to just above half its HP. I go for a Snarl, which does end up one-shotting through the confusion as Delmise goes down in just one more turn. Kyogre was back, and now it's just a 1v1 between Kyogre and Hydreigon, and after going for a Snarl, I managed to lower its special attack by one stage. This single move is what allowed me to take down this primordial being and get past boss Archie. We finally got probably the biggest power spike of the entire run, getting Mega Garchomp with Guts and a Toxic Orb. This was about to go insane, but it was time to make one final addition to our team as we run into a Dragapult. I used the one Master Ball that I found during this run to catch it, and now I had to pick who to swap out, but this was a pretty easy decision as Flygon has just been underperforming this entire run, and I think I finally understand why everybody wants to get a Mega. But it was Wave 180, and we are fighting no other than Grants for the 4th time. I couldn't believe it. I mean, seriously, if I lost here, I probably would have uninstalled this game and deleted my YouTube channel because this is the 4th time I fought the exact same trainer in the same run. Anyways, you guys probably know the drill at this point, I'd be surprised if you didn't, as I just end up going with Dragonite and just completely obliterating Grant's team one by one. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, because it's time for the Elite Four. The first Elite Four member we'd be facing is Shauntal, and if you guys have watched any of my videos before, I am like 35% certain that I have fought the exact same Elite Four in every single one of my videos. Now, feel free to go fact check that, but I'm pretty confident that that is the case. Anyways, Shauntal is always the easiest out of the 4 that I'm fighting, so this was not any different this run. Next up was none other than Elite Four Marshal himself, and I decided to lead with my Toxic Orb Guts Garchomp that was already poisoned before this fight thanks to Wave 183. I end up deciding just to go for a Dual Chop, which was able to take out Sawk in just one turn. And the only reason I didn't go for a Dragon Dance here was that I was so confident that I was beating this gym trainer without having to beef up one of my Pokemons, and I was correct, long story short. But Tauros comes in and does actually manage to hit a close combat on me, taking me down to about 65% of my HP, as Toxic Orb keeps chipping down Garchomp's life force. Mienshao gets subbed in and just gets dual chopped into oblivion, as Garchomp is now on its final turn, and I decide I'ma just let it go out into glory as I go for a Bitter Blade, taking Conkeldurr down to just above his 2nd health bar. Garchomp does go down after this turn, but it's okay as I send a Noivern and go for a Nasty Plot, assuming Conkeldurr didn't have anything that would be able to one-shot me. Conkeldurr, funnily enough, goes for a Stone Edge, which might have killed me, but I'm not too sure, but it missed anyway, so it doesn't matter. A couple of Air Blasts is all it takes to take down both Conkeldurr and Embar, and Tauros is now the only Pokemon Marshal has left, as it also goes down to a Dragon Pulse. We are blazing through this Elite Four right now, as it's time to fight Grimsley, and he might be in competition with Shauntal for being the easiest of the Elite Four for this generation. He sends in King Gambit immediately, meaning that its Overlord ability literally means nothing, because nobody has fainted on his team, but it's still more than enough to take down my Noivern in just a few turns. I was pretty confident it wouldn't be able to take out Garchomp though, and it turns out Grimsley had the exact same thought process as it switched into Bombirdier. Bombirdier was also no match though, as I just go for a Dual Chop, taking it down in just one hit. The second Dual Chop didn't even land because Bombirdier was already down. At this point, I was confident I could just start spamming Bitter Blade to give Garchomp as many turns as possible until Crocodile came in, and I decided to go for a Dual Chop, which landed a critical hit, meaning that it was more than enough to take down the Crocodile in just one turn. Liepard comes back in, but doesn't have Fake Out, I'd assume, and so I was able to Bitter Blade it, taking it down in just one hit, as Zoroark made the exact same fate, and we are actually full HP despite having the Toxic Orb on us this entire fight. King Gambit comes in, and he had no chance of living a Bitter Blade, as that was all it took to take down Elite Four Grimsley. It was now time for Elite Four Caitlyn and her team of beefy psychic types, leading off with Shauntal. Now, she did immediately switch into Hatterene, which was a little bit nerve-wracking, but after a Dragon Dance and the Toxic Orb boost, I was able to one-shot it with just a single Lance Wrath. Caitlyn then sends in her Hisuian Braviary, which I forgot even existed, and this Pokemon looks so cool in my opinion, and I kinda wanna use it maybe in the next video. Anyway, she sends in her Uniqueless, and she gets one-shot by one use of Dual Chop, not even needing the second chop to take her down. Gothitelle then comes in and meets the exact same fate, but this time it actually took the 2 hits from Dual Chop to take her down because of her boss health bar. Musharna comes in and you guys have never guessed, we take her down in just 1 hit with another use of Dual Chop. And Mega Garchomp with 1 use of Dragon Dance plus Guts Toxic Orb, I'm not gonna lie, I'd be very surprised if you guys can find a Pokemon that's able to take this thing down before it gets killed itself. I don't know why, but I decided to send a Noivern and go for an Aeroblast that didn't even one-shot, so I basically just sacrificed Noivern for literally no reason. But it's okay, as I sent in Dragapult and used Dragon Darts, taking down Gallade in just 1 turn, securing our win against Elite Four Caitlyn. It was now time to fight the champion, Iris, and her team of dragons, so it was time to see who the best Dragon-type gym leader actually was. That wasn't until she sent out her Gigantamax Lapras, which was probably going to be a huge problem for my team, considering Ice-type is super effective against every member of my team, except for Dracovish. That being said, I sent Dracovish in, as I learned from my last time, and I just decided to go for a Fish's Rend, which despite being not very effective, takes Lapras down to just a quarter of her HP, before Iris switches into Archaeolodon, which I decided I need to switch out due to the Parasong on the previous turn. Hydreigon comes in, but gets obliterated on the switch, meaning that I had a free switch into Garchomp the very next turn, going for a Dragon Dance. This worked out in my favor as she switches into Archeops for whatever reason, and I was just able to dual chop this bird into oblivion using just 1 chop. Gigantamax Lapras comes back in, and I go for another dual chop, one-shotting it. This Garchomp is insane. I just decided to go dual chop on the rest of Iris's team, and as I'm sure most of you guys can predict, this was more than enough to just obliterate through her team, as I go for a Bitter Blade on Archaeolodon, healing me almost back up to full HP. Haxorus came in against this demon of a Garchomp and went down in just 1 use of Dual Chop. It was 1 chop, and that was a boss Haxorus. It's insane how powerful this Garchomp really is, thanks to this Guts ability. Reshiram comes down, but it's no Dragon-type legendary compared to Garchomp, and now it was time for probably the hardest fight in the game. It was time for the infamous Wave 195, and more importantly, our final rival fight against Ivy. As per usual, she leads with her Meowscarada, which ends up stealing my King's Rock, my Toxic Orb, and my Quick Claw with 1 use of Triple Axle due to her Magician ability. Now this kind of ended up screwing over Meowscarada as she just got poisoned, and I still had the poison effect from Garchomp's Toxic Orb before, so I guess it was kind of pointless for her to steal all those items, but you know what, I digress. Staraptor comes in and gets absolutely obliterated once again by, you guessed it, another Dual Chop before Mega Rayquaza comes in. I go for a Dual Chop, but despite the Guts boost, I only did 1 health bar per Dual Chop, meaning our Garchomp went down the very same turn. Dragapult then comes in, and I assumed I'd outspeed, and that was correct, as Dragapult was able to take down Rayquaza in just 1 use of Dragon Darts, securing our win against the giant behemoth. Kingdra comes in, but Dragapult I believe is the fastest Dragon-type Pokemon in the game, and just one of the fastest Pokemon in general, so I was very confident just going for a Dragon Dance here, ensuring that I would one-shot the rest of her team, seeing Vikavolt wasn't able to 2-shot my Dragapult. Annihilate comes in though, and despite the Dragon Dance boost, tanks a Dragon Darts and then Shadow Punches us straight into hell. Hydreigon comes out though, and at this point I was pretty confident as Ivy only had 2 Pokemon left and both of them were about half HP, as Hydreigon takes down Annihilate with a Dragon Pulse before Vikavolt meets the exact same fate, securing our final win against our rival Ivy. It's time to get the answer to our initial question of whether or not Dragon types can sweep through the entirety of Pokerogue, as now we are up against the final boss, Eternatus. I decided to switch into Dracovish here because Dracovish actually didn't have any Dragon type moves, meaning I couldn't hit Eternatus for any super effective damage, making Dracovish kinda useless. There were two things I could do from here. I can either go into Mega Garchomp, set up a Dragon Dance, and hope that Dual Chop's enough to get Eternamax into its Eternamax form, or I can go Dragapult and take the safe route because I do outspeed and I can just click Dragon Darts twice. I ended up going for the latter, sending a Dragapult and clicking Dragon Darts once before going for it a second time. And now Dragapult was probably the most clutch pickup of this entire run due to its one move, Infestation. Infestation is a move that just does percentage damage after every single turn. This is so great for Pokerogue because there's so many stat changes and stat buffs that having a move that just chips down every turn regardless of stats is insanely good, especially for these boss runs. Now, that being said, Dragapult did survive a very long time as I was able to just stack up Dragon Dances, and Hydreigon actually survived due to a Focus Band, lowering Eternatus' attack by just one stage using Snarl. I ended up going for a Dragon Darts just to see how much damage I could do, but since Eternatus was so buffed due to all of its berries, it didn't do too much damage. And that's a great example of why Infestation is such a great move, because despite it being so beefy now, Infestation completely ignores the stat buffs from Eternatus, taking down the same percentage of HP after every turn. But now we have our two goats at the field at the same time, Dragapult and Garchomp. I ended up going for Dragon Darts and Dragon Dance on Garchomp. I don't know why I decided to go for a setup move here, as Eternatus was going to outspeed me regardless, and I'm sure Lance Wrath would have been more than enough to take out Eternatus in one turn here. But it didn't matter too much as Garchomp gets hit with the Dynamax Cannon, but lived it due to its bulkiness. On the next turn, I go for the combination I should have went with the first time, being Dragon Darts and Lance Wrath, but Eternatus somehow outsped Dragapult, taking it down with a Cross Poison. Eternatus lived Lance Wrath due to a Focus Band item that it stole from me, which meant that Noivern or Garchomp was going down on the next turn and was not going to make it to the end of the game. The Pokemon that went down was unfortunately Garchomp, but it didn't matter as Noivern was able to clean up Eternatus with one final Dragon Boost. And that is exactly how we were victorious in Pokerogue using only Dragon-type Pokemon. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button, as I really do appreciate all the love I've gotten in the beginning of my journey, and I am so excited to see where we're able to take this YouTube channel. That being said, I'll hope to see all of you guys in the next video, as I don't even know what challenge I'm going to be doing next, and feel free to leave any recommendations down in the comments below, and I hope to see y'all next time. Peace.